cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
How did you get started? Like, how did you get into, product and what you're doing now versus, I think a lot of people might be interested in see how did you, where did you go to school? What was your kind of background that got you into this entrepreneurial space?
Sure. Well, first of all, sincerely, thank you for having me here. I'm flattered, and I care a ton about technology. I care a ton about media, and I care about startups, and I care about DC. So this kind of brings it all together. And I care about you.
Oh, thank you.
And all of you.
We're gonna do hugs later.
But
start the line right here.
But sincerely, it's great to be at a place. I have never been here before to this space, and it's amazing to see, and it's inspiring. So it's fun and a thrill to be here. So thanks. And to answer your question, my route everyone has a different route. My route was I was always kind of a media geek, and I cared about media news, information, entertainment, and I kind of grew up always wanted to get involved in that. When I was in college, I took an internship at CNN. When I moved to DC, I actually took my first job in DC was working as a production assistant right across the way at WETA, just somehow to get involved in media. And that really, internship for or a PA job for a PBS affiliate, hard to pay the bills. And so I wound up going to business school, and I was fortunate in that the internet, this was show my age a little, this was 96 or so, and the internet was just kind of coming into its own as I was coming out of grad school, and I joined up with AOL.
That's a good time. That's a good timing right there.
It's really fortunate timing. Although I'm sure we'll talk a lot tonight about risk taking and following your passion and all that kind of stuff. And for me, I went to Wharton, UPenn, and every year they publish the salary ranges. They don't say who's making what, but they have a line, and then they have dots representing the various salaries. And at one end of the spectrum is the lowest, and the other is the highest. And I recognized my salary on there, and it was the second to lowest one on the spectrum of the graduating class of '96. And I recognized the first lowest one. He was a friend of mine who went to work for a nonprofit where he pretty much wasn't being paid. So I took a risk. I joined this internet. It wasn't quite a startup anymore. AOL had already gone public, but it was in hyper growth mode, and that was my path to where I am.
Back then, numbers wise, what were the numbers for people online? It was probably under 1 million, right?
Yeah, I think I remember I interned in between years of grad school, and at that point, but I was a little late, so by then they had 3 million members.
Wow.
And then by the time I joined full time, just a year later, it was already past 5 million.
Wow. And that's probably what, I don't know your traffic numbers, but that's one site for a second.
That's a good point.
So
now we're up to 80 million now.
Right. So that's what I mean. So a split second of your day. It's crazy.
5 million people.
Yeah, exactly.
Eat that for lunch.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's interesting. So AOL, you led up some interesting products there. We can talk a little bit more about it, but some of the ones that come to mind are some of the social products, as well as Netscape. And what's the one that you loved the most, when you were kind of leading up those product teams?
All of them are great, but maybe the one that jumps to mind is probably because it's most related to what I do now. Is I acquired a company called Weblogs Inc. That was a blogging platform, and acquired it with the notion that we would launch a whole bunch of new media properties. And we did that. We launched TMZ, we launched Fan House.
So you launched TMZ?
Launched TMZ. It was a partnership with Warner Brothers, and we'll talk about what I do today, but the idea was pretty much the same. We saw that there was a change going on in the way media was being constructed. It was becoming more real-time, more social. Right. All things that we take for granted today. It was becoming less about a portal. AOL was clearly becoming less relevant, but portals in general were becoming less relevant. Consumers can use Google and now could use Facebook or Twitter to go to exactly what they want to go to. So we wanted to take advantage of that trend by launching targeted topical media properties. And blogging was a way to kind of go after it, and you would hire a talented team and just set them loose, and that's exactly what we did. Harvey Levin really made the site what it is and continues to. For those of you who either go to TMZ, you don't have to admit it, but or if you watch the show, you've seen him. He's that guy, and he was actually the mastermind behind it all. We started it up, and one of the first things we did was hire him.
How'd you find him?
He had a reputation. It was a partnership, a joint venture between AOL, and I led that side of it, and then Warner Brothers, and there was a guy named Jim Paratori, and Jim knew Harvey from, I think he hired him to work at the People's Court back in the day, and he knew that he would be the right guy for this, and he was.
Okay. That's interesting. And then are there other products? You AIM and some of these other products?
Yeah, AIM, ICQ, MapQuest, MoviePhone, Netscape.com, CompuServe. I was younger at the time. I would say a kid, but probably still older than a lot of people in this room. I was 30 years old or so, and AOL had acquired all these properties along the way, and it was before internet advertising ever existed. And so for AOL, it's like, well, we're making all this money on subscription. Why would we have all these free websites? It's just, but they acquired them all, and then they're like, oh, let's give them to this kid to manage. And that's what they did, and it was a great experience for me to understand how the web was working, what generated traffic, and then another good stroke of timing is the internet advertising market actually came into existence and turned around, and these things were actually becoming businesses. And then fast forward to 2004, well, AOL was like, all right, the ISP game is over, we have to become a media company. And that's when I moved from California back here and embarked on helping them to do that for a few years.
Interesting. So you mentioned weblogs. So you were working with Jason Cofounder?
Yep. I have the dubious distinction of being Jason's boss, if to the extent that anyone ever could be. But no, we got along really well, still do, and his partner Brian Alvey, who was the product guy, really brilliant guy as well.
Definitely, yeah. So interestingly, we'll talk about that. There's a bit of a metaphor there, where you literally were building that's a product that they built. Weblogs Inc. was actually a blogging platform, and then you fast forward to now, and you've got Vox Media, but it started as a sports site.
Yeah,
right?
SB Nation.
So you started in SB Nation, and you guys built a product there as well, the platform itself.
Yeah, and for context, for those of you who are unfamiliar with our company today, it's Vox Media, and we run 7 different consumer media titles. Like in the old days, there were magazine titles, and then there were cable networks, and now there's online sites, and we seek to be the leader across all the verticals that we're in. Sports is our first one, SB Nation, then we have The Verge and tech and culture, we have Polygon and gaming, Racked, which is retail and fashion, Curbed, which is real estate and home, Eater, which is dining and nightlife and food culture, and then the newest one is called just Vox.com, and that's general news. Right. So we have these 7 sites. It started off with SB Nation. SB Nation in itself is actually comprised of 300 different sites. Right. Each one is a team, covers a team or a topic. So, if you're a fan of the San Francisco Giants, you go to McCovey Chronicles, and that's how you know us. If you're a fan of the Washington Nationals, you go to Federal Baseball. If you're a fan of the Chicago Cubs, I'm sorry, but you would go to Bleed Cubby Blue,
which I do.
But baseball, football, every single sport, and we're having a great traffic season right now with World Cup. Yeah. But the notion was, let's go after these topical points of passion for people. But in order to do that at scale, you needed a product platform, which was your question. And so we developed one. It's called Chorus. Right. And Chorus really became the company's primary asset, and just like you think of the great web companies of our time, whether it's Facebook, which is a platform for self-expression, or Amazon, which is a platform for e-commerce, or Netflix, which is a platform for filmed entertainment. We aspire to be a platform for creating professional media brands at scale, and also for brand advertising at scale as well. And that's the mission of the company.
So when you first started, let's figure out how did you get involved in Vox? it had been around. I mean, or SB Nation it had been around a little while, right? And you jumped in and.
Yeah, so I left AOL in the end of 2006, and I had a non-compete, which was a good thing because it forced me to like survey the landscape. I joined up, needed to make some money still, so I joined up as an advisor to a private equity group, which wasn't competitive. And while I was there, I did some cool stuff. It is called Providence Equity. I was an advisor there. I helped them structure the Hulu deal, so we help start Hulu with them. And then, but all the while I was like looking around at cool companies. I joined some boards and kind of got to survey the landscape. But there was these guys who were doing this sports blogs thing, and they came to me and they're like, "Hey, we heard your background, love some advice." I was a little skeptical, I didn't know who are these guys, but as I got to know them, I really just fell in love with what they were doing. And in my head, I had thought like, when I was at AOL, I reported to the CEO. I had 1,600 people working for me, and I thought I was a big deal. And in my head, I was like, all right, my next job, I'd like to maybe run something, but it'd probably be, something that was bigger. But I fell in love with this. I'd barely call it a startup at the time. It was like a really interesting hobby. It wasn't much of a company.
Right.
And I fell in love with it over, a courtship period of a year or two. And ultimately, we realized we needed some money if we were going to do this. So we set out to raise our Series A, and we, successfully did that, and we were off to the races.
Did you ever, did you start, so you were advising basically to start.
Yeah.
Did you end up funding it for a little while? Or?
I did. I went from advisor to board member to, we need some money, Jim. And I gave him some money, and I was at AOL, but unfortunately I started at a low level, and then I didn't sell my stock at the height.
I know some other people that did that.
So I didn't. Point is, I didn't have enough money to like be investing too much in startups. But this was one. I talked to my wife, and we're like, okay, we're gonna put a little bit of money into this because we really believe in it. Mm-hmm. And 3 months go by, and the money is dwindling and dwindling. It wasn't just me; it was a couple other people, and then 5 months go by, and the money's just about out, and that's when you really become like involved in a startup.
Now you're raising their money for them.
And we did another little bridge loan, and at that point my wife was like, and so that's when we determined like, all right, we either have to find a way to sell this company or finance it, and we ultimately financed it.
Found its way. And now, you guys have since then obviously built into this bigger company, but you've raised how much now?
We've raised about $80 million. Yeah.
Wow. It's pretty good.
Yeah. But good, I don't know what you mean.
No, that's pretty impressive. There's some strings attached to that, but.
Yeah, I'm proud of the fact that like we've actually been able to kind of in each subsequent round of financing go in with a purpose and then execute against that and successfully do that. The last round we raised about half of that, and our goal was to acquire Curved Direct, which we did, and our second goal was to launch a general news property. We were able to recruit Ezra Klein and his team to help us build Vox. Yep. And then we, of course, are investing in our product platform. And now our focus, I know, is one of the questions that I got on Twitter was, monetization. And, our focus is on monetization in addition to growing our audience.
Okay, so let's talk more about product, because I know that's something I know really well, and you've done that for a long time. And you've taken an interesting approach to it with the content strategy that you have. Would you say that your content is a product?
I'd say that content is part of the product. The product is really the overall experience, though, which is inclusive of what's written on the page, what filmed, what videos on the page, what advertising's on the page, what interactions you do. It's an experience. Because if you just look at it as the content, well, if I just took that content and printed it out, it would be a very different experience than consuming it on your phone or your tablet or on your laptop. So we create digital experiences.
And how do you do that on a day-to-day basis?
There's a lot of things that go into it. You know, it starts with, it does start with great storytelling, but that storytelling has to be aided and assisted with everything from outstanding design to excellent user interactions, you know, kind of intuitive UX, great writing, great photography, great navigation, great ways of finding an audience, whether it's search, social, direct, you know, so there's a lot of different things that go into it day to day. And, you know, I think part of our advantage is that we work hard to create a platform to make all that into a system and make it repeatable.
Right.
And that has given us an advantage. You know, a lot of, those of you who follow this sector probably know that, you know, there's a lot of skepticism around whether content can scale. And you know, I've had to raise money, go to Silicon Valley. We have some of the best, most successful investors in the world, Excel Partners, Comcast Ventures,
yeah.
Khosla Ventures. You know, so, you know, the bluest of the blue chip VCs have backed us, and they wouldn't have backed us if they thought, oh, like, hey, here's a company that creates cool content. They backed us because we take a platform approach to doing it, and we're very much a technologically driven media company that values technology, talent, and then the culture that we can create around all of that. And
so that's the formula: technology, people, and
yeah,
culture.
that actually is the formula, but you know, it's easier said than done sometimes. But yes.
Okay. And you guys take an agile approach to building product then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we deploy, you know, several times a day, and yeah, we're, you know, if you're ever in town, like we're headquarters are here, split between DC and New York, but most of our product team is here, although some in other parts of the country as well. But you can, you know, it's a cool culture because it's like tech meets media, and the feedback loop that's created between it is really where the magic is.
So we were going to talk about culture in a minute. The first one was talent. How do you attract talent? Like you basically, with The Verge, for example, let's take that as a case study. You launched The Verge. There's a lot of people in that space, you know, covering that space pretty heavily. How did you approach that?
You know, what we found with kind of editorial talent, whether it's the folks who work at The Verge or Vox or Curb, Dieter Rack, whatever, like anyone, they have aspirations. They want to be successful. You know, we tend to attract digital media natives, people who want to be professionals and who have big ambitions in this space, who know how to apply this craft. And this craft is telling stories, conducting digital journalism, which is different than other forms of media. And you know, there's some things that are common, like I don't want to overstate it. I mean, telling the truth is common, finding facts is common. You know, but there's some things that are different. How you communicate with the audience, how you distribute your content, how you craft the stories, and the tools that you have to do that. And so, if you're someone who practices that craft, you want to go to a place that you know can be successful and can enable you. You want to go to a place that has the right tools, the right technology, the right culture, the right business model, the right mindset, and the right environment for you to be successful. And we believe that we're that place, and as a result, we're able to attract great talent who are people, you know, like Amanda Clute, who runs Eater, or like Ezra Klein or Melissa Bell or Matt Iglesias, who started Vox.com. Like they, you know, Ezra and I were on Charlie Rose recently. By the way, you're very Charlie-esque up there. So, but like he asked Ezra, I think, you know, what Jim really must have wooed you to come over here, and Ezra, like on TV, was like, Jim's great, but he's a nice guy. It has nothing to do with Jim. It's the culture and the platform that we were able to create. Yeah.
Interesting. That is really interesting. And then culturally, like, you're at how many people now?
About 350.
So how do you take that culture that you created out of, I remember when you guys were just in that one, you know, flat or whatever over in DC. I'm assuming you still either have that or grown out of that. How do you take that and apply it to 350 people as you scale the company, and then obviously get people to see that as an asset to join?
Everyone that like culture, really hits you. When I was younger in my career, I didn't understand what culture meant really. You would say the word, and I was like a little like just like if you build a great product and you sell it and you make money, like that's what business is about, and I was overly dismissive of it, I think. And as I've grown, and certainly as I've grown as a leader, I now recognize that it's everything. And you hear people say that, but you don't really get it. Like one example that I give to people, like managers and leaders in our organization, is for those of you who live here in DC and go in, like you see bike couriers. Has everyone like seen a bike courier in DC?
They are brave. They are crazy.
Yes. Yeah, they're brave and they're crazy, and they all like share some traits, like whether they're men or women, like they tend to have a lot of piercings and and like crazy hair and like kind of a hardcore attitude.
Definitely.
And it's probably and it's like you never see like a biker who is like, I don't know, in a like preppy outfit or something like that.
And they're never on the beach cruiser. You never see them on a beach cruiser. They're always like racing around, like weaving in and out. Like,
and they're all, and they're awesome sometimes, they're horrible sometimes, whatever. But they, it's a culture, and and it becomes somewhat maybe self-selecting or whatever. Anyway, we have a different culture than that. But like when someone comes into the organization, the culture tends to subsume them sometimes, but they also bring something to the culture as well, and we're looking for people who can thrive in the culture, but who can also bring new perspective to the culture as well. And so one of the things I always tell people when they start is come in, spend a week or a month here, write down the things that you came here to do first, write down the things that you think are messed up about this company as you're coming in as a new person.
Yep.
But then don't say anything about it. Like put that envelope away for 6 months or maybe a year and go back to the list and let's talk about the list and give me your perspective. Like, do you still think those things are messed up? Because they very well could be messed up and I want to know if they are. Or it could be that like, hey, this is something that you use unique to our organization, maybe different than what you've experienced, and now you get why it is now that you've been here for a year. And so, it's important like that a culture has to continue to evolve in order to remain relevant and not get trapped in its own success or whatever. And we try to keep it alive that way.
That's really interesting. So what have you gone through that? Does everyone do that envelope thing? Like
we haven't formalized that as a process, but everyone who works for me, though, everyone I work with does.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about advertising. We talked a little bit about content, and there's obviously a race to the bottom there. Let's talk about advertising. It's when you first started at AOL, you mentioned they gave you the products to run that were online, and that's when it was just you're trying to figure out how to monetize those, right? So that's changed a lot. Like, what are you doing now? You guys are kind of doing a kind of a different model there, and I wanted to hear more about that.
Yeah, and this relates to the business model question, but show of hands, like, who has, not just online but anywhere, like who has encountered advertising period that has inspired you or made you laugh or provoked some sort of emotional reaction ever on TV and magazines or anywhere? Like, okay, now, like, who has had a reaction like that with internet advertising, with banner ads? Anyone have them with pop-ups?
Just love those pop-ups. Yeah.
Who has been irritated by internet advertising? Who has found it to be an effective way of, two questions here. One is, who's found it to be an effective way of like selling you something as a consumer? Like, actually, I want to buy something online.
Only if it's super targeted, like about a specific thing I was looking for.
And who's found it an effective way? We're all kind of marketers in some sense here. Who's found it an an effective way to build a brand image or a brand identity.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one in the back. That's good. Because I'm actually with you, sir. But I don't think the industry is there yet. I mean, I raised my hand in aspiration. I don't think we're there yet. And I see some evidence in some places where it can be. And our company is a company that's dedicated to storytelling. It's what we do around you asked me what our product was, and I said it was about creating an online experience that was rooted in storytelling and design. And when you think about what a marketer is trying to do, they're trying to do two things actually. They're trying to actually like sell you the thing. Let's pick any example, but let's pick a car like a Cadillac. So Cadillac needs to sell cars, or Cadillac will not be in business. And the internet has been a phenomenal disruption, revolutionary way for Cadillac or any other product company to sell their products. Starting with Google, which has become among the most valuable companies in the world by transforming how things are sold directly. The way I look at it is like Google search links are like the best way to gauge demand and then like have you click through. And then after that, so Cadillac sees I've been on the Cadillac website or clicked on the link, and now they will retarget me and follow me around the web. Show me Cadillac ads everywhere I go on the web. And actually that's like effective too, because if I am in the market for a Cadillac, I want to be reminded and go back, and we've all been, so the web is really great at selling you things, but before one can buy something, an image has to be created for a product. A Cadillac is a hunk of metal and an engine, and someone once said to me, well, you know what the difference between an Escalade and a Land Rover is? Well, like the answer was one advertises in fortune, like powerful, the other advertises in town and country, refined, and really they're both like luxury SUVs, but it's about the image and the perception that they're trying to create. It's about the stories they're trying to tell. And I can say the same thing about Coke versus Pepsi, or about really any consumer product or most any product. It's branding, and it's image creation, it's perception, it's awareness creation, and the web has not successfully created advertising at scale to do that yet. And so what we're doing, what we're finding is working, is applying our storytelling technology platform processes and access to our audience, and eventually audiences beyond ours as well, to help create and distribute and enable marketers to tell their stories to digital audiences. And as we stepped back and looked at it, we thought marketers are trying to do the same thing that we're trying to do, which is tell stories to digital audiences and engage them in those stories. And we can help them do that. And that's how we're making money.
So can you give, just for folks that may not be following this closely, can you give an example of what something like that might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working with like dozens of top tier marketers. The one that we did recently, I'll just pick Microsoft, who they were launching a new product called OneDrive, and it was kind of a competitor to Dropbox, and we created a series of stories for them. Their goal was to get people to sample the product and learn about the product and create an image for the product. That the image they were, one of the things they were trying to say is like, hey, this is a safe and exciting place for you to share your stories and your photos and whatever. So we did a series of interviews with notable people. One of them was a NASA pilot, an astronaut, and the way that it worked is like we filmed him, and we also like wrote about him. But the video series was about, we presented on a Surface tablet like the history of his life in photos. And what was neat about it was, first of all, it was like a very emotional thing. It was about how throughout his life he was given second chances. Whether he was a football player at the University of Richmond, he had a high school teacher who, when he was down, helped him get to the point where he can get accepted into school, and then his coach helped him make the varsity team, and then ultimately, he had all these second chances.
So you're on a
at the
journey
point.
with this person.
On a dream with this person,
Yeah.
and it's an emotional thing. It helps brand the product, but there's also this element of it because it's the internet and you're not just showing the person the video. You can then link straight into that person's Drive account and actually go through the photos yourself and share them with other people. So you're experiencing the product, and so it's an example of like how this medium could both tell stories and engage you in the product and build brand.
It's very integrated, I guess would be a word.
It is. And then speaking of integration, what we can do, and a lot of people refer to this as native advertising, but whether it's on The Verge or SB Nation, we can put it up there, and of course we fully disclose in like big bold type that this is a Microsoft sponsor, brought to you by Microsoft, paid for by Microsoft. So we're not like this only works if you're very transparent about things. But what we found is with that transparency, these stories perform as well as any of our other stories because they're actually good. They're interesting, they're compelling and engaging human stories, and as a result, everyone wins. The audience wins, the marketer wins, our business model wins. Yep.
And are you calling it native advertising? Because I mean, obviously I've heard that term quite a bit, but is that what you're calling it?
We try to stay away from that term. It's harder and harder to stay away from it.
It also skews towards the advertorial.
That's
piece,
right, and that's exactly
there's a difference. There is a difference.
They're not
telling you what to say.
There is a difference. It's the other thing about native advertising is in our industry, it does, there's certain elements of it that I think are shady, are unethical.
There's an integrity question.
There's integrity questions, and so we like to just steer clear of that because, like, for us, integrity is paramount, and we'll lose our audience without it over time. So,
anybody here heard of native advertising before? Just want to get a show. Yeah, a few. Okay, it's getting out there. That term. What?
Sometimes we call it integrated, or but so I don't want to get caught up in semantics.
No.
Yeah.
And I'd heard that you guys had created an agency kind of built as part of Vox. It's called Vox Creative.
We have, yeah. Because what we found was a lot of agencies, marketers, brands need help with this. They're new to it. Like most publishers, most media companies are having trouble understanding how to use the technologies, how to use the analytics, how to use data to tell these stories. And so we thought, well, we do this for a living, we can help them do it for a living. Sometimes they don't need our help. Sometimes, a creative agency will step in and do it themselves, and that's great. We just empower them. And other times we can actually work with them to create the stories.
That's really smart. I mean, we see the same thing even on Tech Hawk, though. We're working with different brands, and it's a lot of time brainstorming, figuring out what would actually work for what their goals are. And it sounds like you built that part of the business to be able to do that. So you're not.
That's right. It's called Vox Creative, and
Interesting. Okay, so you guys had a big year last year. What's in store for this year?
This year we're really working on a few things. Like we did have a big year, and between the fourth quarter last year, the end of last year, and the beginning of this year, we either acquired or launched 4 new sites. So we went from 3 to 7, and one of them was via an acquisition, or 3 of them actually were via an acquisition. Yeah. So in acquisitions, those of you who have been through them know that if you don't pay a lot of attention and do them right, they can be a disaster. Those of you who perhaps worked with AOL or Time Warner might have heard of that. But in our case, like, we really wanted to focus on making that right. We launched Vox.com, which out of the gate has just been a home run for us. And I'm not one of those CEOs who, even though our company's doing great, I don't walk around saying we're killing it, because I think I hate when people do that. But like with Vox,
we'll say it for you. They're killing it.
But Vox is off to like just an incredibly strong start. There was an article on a website just yesterday talking about how per Comscore and Quantcast, all the other services, we're up to about depending on how you count, between 4 and 6 million unique visitors. After only being that was after 1.5 months, we had grown to that size, and rivaling some of the established competitors who've been in business for many years, and far ahead of a lot of the other startups. So
let's talk. How do you do that? That's crazy. That's crazy growth.
It's that formula that you
I know
that you mentioned.
But how do you do it? That's.
Listen, great people is what it ultimately boils down to. Like that.
But is there partnerships and stuff in there too? I mean, what are like? How do you take something from zero to
in that case? There's no partnerships, no marketing. You know, one thing I don't know if I'm actually proud of this, but one thing about our company is grown to, I guess, about 85 million, an audience of 85 million monthly visitors without spending any money on paid marketing. Never Facebook ads, never Google ads. I say I don't know if I should be proud of that because like it actually, you know, for a lot of companies that's a winning strategy, and so that's great for them. For us, we have let our experiences and our content do all the marketing, and that's what's happened with Vox. So we don't have any like big distribution agreements, and we don't have any paid ads behind that. That's all happened based on the strength of the experience, which is certainly based on the reputation of the writers. You know, a woman like Sarah Cliff, who's the preeminent healthcare expert, or Ezra or Brad Plumer on energy. There's a lot of just very talented people there. Combine that with our Vox product team, who gives them the platform to do this well, and you've got a winning formula.
And then the other parts of the company that can help
That's
point
right.
to it? I mean, is that...
No, actually, we like...
None of that either. Because I know AOL used to be the homepage. You get it on the homepage, that's a 10-minute
Yeah, we take a little bit of a different approach. When there's, you know, so at AOL, like, at a portal, what you do is, like, you try to, like, you launch a new politics site and you promote that politics site on your on your homepage. We don't have a homepage,
right?
But you know, and we don't want to promote it on the sports page because people who like are there for sports like get that politics out of my face is like an escape from that. Or people who you know are interested in Eater, like which are our dining site. It's like I'm here for dining, I'm not here for sports. I know that there are sports sites on the internet, and I'll go to one when I'm ready to go to one. And but I'm here for this context. So we don't have a heavy hand about that. When there's organic opportunities, World Cup is a good example because the World Cup crosses cultural lines and sometimes political lines, and so you know when there's an organic opportunity to do it, we do it. But that's based on kind of an editorial discretion.
Okay. That makes sense. Let's talk about DC. You mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, you're based here. You've been here for a while. How do you feel about, I mean, running your company from DC and in general about the kind of startup ecosystem here?
Well, I love living in DC. I have 3 children, and my wife and I love living here and being part of the community here. And we think there's no better place to like raise a family, and from a business perspective, I think it's a great place too. I mean, there's you know ups and downs. You know, like for startup culture, like I'm so grateful that there are places like this because I think early on when we were doing this, or it was a tough place. I think you know you can be squeezed out by the kind of federal government culture to some degree. You know that creates opportunity for sure, but it also limits opportunities in some senses. So, you know, there are strengths and minuses. Like from a recruiting perspective, I think, you know, there are certain infrastructural things that are lacking that certainly that like a San Francisco or a Boston or even a New York has. Like you're missing maybe some of the ecosystem, but I think that's starting to build up. Yeah. And what I find is as we recruit people to come in here, sometimes they move from other places, sometimes we find them here. But what I find is it's a little harder to recruit, but it's a lot easier to retain. Mm-hmm. You know, people come here and they love it. I also find that one thing I like about it, say, as opposed to being in Silicon Valley where I worked for several years, is there's less of a fishbowl, let's chase the shiny object thing. It's like, you know, it's like we've got to get pin boards up and we've got to have our social messaging app up, and like you know there's temptation to move from one thing to the other if you're like in that environment. Look, we're aware of all that stuff. We can read blogs, we can read like everyone else, and so it's not like we're isolated, but we can kind of sit back a little bit and think about what's best for us.
What do you even call it? Is that pressure, so regional pressure or something, like for chasing, you know, whatever that is?
Yeah, maybe. Like in a way, Silicon Valley it's cultural pressure, you know, in that culture, and you know, it's you know, it's like this VC is like funding that kind of company, so let's be that kind of company, You know, here we can kind of follow our vision a little bit more. And you know, as I said earlier, that could be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing if you're not open to outside influences. So, you know, but I think DC, being an international city, being a very technologically savvy city, being a very well-educated city, like you certainly get those important influences.
All right, we're going to go to questions here in a second, so get those ready if you have them. We'll do, hold on one second, one more question, and then we'll get over there. How are you feeling? Do you need a glass?
No, I'm feeling good. It's
okay.
something in my eye, but
okay.
Other than that, I'm good.
Tearing up already. It's an emotional discussion.
That's right.
So basically, last question, I guess there's more questions here, but the question I was curious about was, in general, you talked about DC, but do you still are you involved, you're running this huge company, are you involved with investing and things like that here, or are you just?
You know, for the same
Advising
financial reasons I mentioned, I don't do too much startup investing personally, but I do like to help out for sure, and you know, do a lot of that. You know, a lot of it informally, some of it more.
No one's going to suck you back into invest and then start another company.
Well, I'm kind of busy with you know, with that and focused. But you know, I certainly help out both, you know, in the community on a personal level, but then, you know, try to be helpful where I can on an ecosystem level. You know.
So let's just say for advice, what are some of the things that you've been telling startups or entrepreneurs that are trying to start something here? Or anywhere?
I'm wary of, you know, we talked about this question, and I'm you know, always wary of it because it's hard to give advice that you haven't read or heard elsewhere, and
right.
Because of that, it starts to sound pretty trite. So rather than tell you something new, I'll just tell you what of all the trite and platitudes, which ones have actually resonated with me. You know, the one that's really resonated with me is you have to just be extraordinarily passionate about what you choose to do. Otherwise, it's just going to be almost impossible to be successful. Not impossible, because I think there are sometimes you just get lucky, but most of the time you don't, and you have to work and you have to care about the thing so much that fame, fortune, ego, everything else just can't matter to you. All that can matter to you is that seeing through this vision, making this thing, and having the world, at least your market, use this thing and benefit from this thing.
That sounds like a mission for you. Is that what you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggle to think about for me, people oh, you know, you sell this thing. What are you gonna, you know, selling is not an end goal for me, and I don't think it should be for anyone else. In some ways, you can look at selling as a failure, perhaps, not in every case, because sometimes it's a good thing.
Depends.
Yeah, it depends. If you think you can further your vision by being part of something else, then that's great. Mm-hmm. You know, but if you're in it for the, you know, purely the financial return, then you should be an investor, not an entrepreneur. And you know, because it's just so tough that you have to just love it. I often say about even the people who are involved in our company, we pay all of our writers. You know, we don't have unpaid interns. We believe that good content should get a good salary. And but having said that, what makes us successful is I think most of the people who work for us and write for us or code for us would do it for free anyway because they care that much. You know, if you're writing about the Cubs, you would write about the Cubs anyway.
Probably would, yeah.
But if you're into making cool stuff in programming or designing, you would do it anyway. And of course, you should be paid, and we pay, you know, top of market in most cases. But but you know, I think people have to be so passionate about it that they would do it for free.
Right. Like bleeding Cubby Blue.
Bleed Cubby Blue. How do you like
exactly.